faithfully discharge my duties in the rank
officer
in the New York City.
The film begins by introducing Bobby Green, the manager of New York City's largest nightclub. In 1988, almost everyone spent their nights at the nightclub, and the nightclub Bobby managed was owned by a Russian whose house was located directly across the street. Although not related by blood, Murat and his wife treated Bobby like their own son and were very pleased with his performance and introspective behavior. However, unfortunately, when a stranger could treat him so well, Bobby felt abandoned by his own family. That night he happened to be invited to a celebration. His father and younger brother Joe were high-ranking police officers. Bobby was so traumatized by meeting his family that he had to smoke marijuana to be able to act normal in front of them, and so that he would have someone to talk to, he also invited his girlfriend to come to the event.
Look at you.
And sure enough, as soon as he arrived at the location, Bobby was immediately taken to the back room to be lectured. And his father's two associates, who were considered family, were also present at the meeting. They then began discussing Joe, who had been promoted to head of the Drug Enforcement Division, and his target was the nephew of the club owner that Bobby currently managed. Fadim was believed to have smuggled a large quantity of drugs into New York City, and they hoped Bobby would share information since Fadim was often seen hanging out at his club.
Are you kidding me?
Just observe, that's all.
Fucking cops, why are you coming to me? Why is this my problem?
Who wouldn't be disappointed when invited to a family event, but ended up being taken advantage of, and afterwards Bobby and Joe got into an argument that eventually required their father to intervene. Even though Bert, a high-ranking police officer, he never taught his son to use violence and always advised Bobby very gently. But this time, the situation was completely different because the nightclub Bobby managed was suspected of being a drug distribution headquarters, which meant that sooner or later Bobby's name would be dragged into it. And if it was indeed a financial matter, his father even offered him a job at his place. That night at the end of the event, people kept clapping for Joe's promotion. But instead of being happy, Bobby, who was heartbroken, chose to leave, especially after his father kept praising Joe's name on stage. In short, a few days later, Bobby resumed his normal life, working as a manager at night and partying during the day, consuming all kinds of illegal drugs to numb the anxiety in his heart. The next day, Bobby was summoned to meet with Mr. Murat again, and there Murat told him he planned to expand his business to several regions. Seeing that the club had been successful under Bobby's management, he planned to appoint him as regional manager, and eventually all of Mr. Murat's nightclubs would be under his supervision. Without thinking twice, Bobby immediately recruited his best friend to be the manager at the new place because he thought Jumbo was really good at throwing parties. However, in the midst of the joy that night, Bobby looked anxious after seeing his girlfriend being flirted with by the cartel boss. As soon as he had a chance, he tried to warn her not to get too close to Fadim because Fadim was under police surveillance. But no sooner had he warned her than it became a reality because shortly afterwards the place was suddenly raided by the police and Joe was the one leading the operation.
You want to touch me?
Who the fuck authorizes?
Everyone who tested positive for drugs was immediately taken to the police station for questioning, and Bobby happened to be one of them. However, Joe's main goal was to arrest Fadim. Unfortunately, a search of his pockets and coat only yielded a few $100s, but at least the police managed to find some ecstasy pills in the possession of Fadim's men. Before being taken away, Fadim suddenly threatened his men in Russian, saying that if his name was dragged into the case, it was certain that their entire family would end tragically.
Let's go.
Upon arriving at the police station, Fadim's men decided to end their lives by slitting their own throats. And from here, we can see how dangerous a cartel boss is. Even Joe didn't expect that they would go this far. In short, the next morning, Bobby's father came to inform him that he would soon be free, and all thanks to Joe's generosity. Hearing the news, Bobby felt insulted, especially since from the start, if he really wanted to help, why did he come to his club in such an arrogant manner? As soon as he was released, Bobby immediately approached Joe to challenge him to a fight because Joe's behavior last night had really crossed the line, and if he cared, Joe should have warned him first.
I'm done with you.
After a tiring day, Joe went home, but when he just got out of the car, suddenly an unknown person appeared and shot him right in the face. The police immediately reported this incident to Inspector Bert, but uniquely before they opened their mouths, he immediately said which child died, as if he had predicted that one day something like this would happen. When his brother was lying in a coma in the hospital, Bobby was seen busy gambling, and when the news reached his ears, he panicked and rushed to the hospital.
Bobkus?
Where you go?
Even though they had argued earlier, Bobby was genuinely worried about his brother's condition, but unfortunately, his father thought he was just being dramatic. According to the detective, Joe survived the shooting because the bullet only grazed his temple and pierced his jaw. His brain was completely unharmed, but his condition is still very concerning. The perpetrator is most likely one of Fadim's men, but the police have not been able to arrest him yet because there is no evidence.
Easy.
Whoa. Nobody's allowed in except the media.
It's his brother.
That night, Bobby felt tremendous regret, especially since there was no guarantee that Joe would wake up from his coma. And even though they always fought, brothers were still brothers. The next day, while enjoying a meal at a restaurant, Bobby accidentally ran into Fadim, and because they knew each other, Bobby approached his table just to chat for a while. Uniquely so far, none of Bobby's friends knew Bobby's family tree, to the point that people thought he was an orphan. The only person who knew about his brother was his own girlfriend. So that morning, Fadim didn't suspect anything at all and invited him to join him.
I got some shit coming in.
Dangerous right now, don't you think?
What hurt Bobby's feelings in the middle of the conversation was when Fadim and his men suddenly said that the police were not a problem, and that they had even managed to shoot the head of the narcotics division last night. And the plan was that if the police still tried to eradicate drugs, the cartel would finish off their leader, who was none other than Bobby's father.
The chief of police will be next.
Why don't you come down and check it out for yourself?
Bobby immediately relayed the news to his father, but once again the police were powerless because they still did not have enough evidence to arrest Fadim. However, if things continued like this, all the police officers could end up being killed by them. Then Bobby said that Fadim had offered him to join them, and that becoming an informant might not be a bad idea, especially since it was the only way to uncover Fadim's operation. Unfortunately, his father rejected the idea outright, not because he doubted his skills, but because it was too risky.
Don't worry about me, just worry about yourself. Goodbye.
Bobby was really anxious after finding out who had hurt his brother because yesterday's crime could not be allowed to go unpunished. Finally, he decided to go to one of the police chiefs who was also his father's good friend, named Michael, and offered himself to become an informant. The next night, Michael gave Bobby a lighter that contained a listening device. His mission seemed very simple: infiltrate the enemy's operation and record all of Fadim's conversations. But the real threat was the risk that came afterwards. If his cover is blown prematurely, Bobby can ask for help by saying a secret code that he himself determined. And since this mission is not approved by Inspector Bert, Bobby's existence as an informant will only be known to Michael.
Don't be a hero. You sense they're onto you, just remember the word is feather.
In short, the news that Bobby wanted to join the cartel was welcomed by Fadim, and that night his men began to explain some basic rules if he wanted to work with them. Since he was still a new member, Bobby was only allowed to come to the production house in a special way, and at the end of the night, he was ordered to wait on the beach because Fadim's men would later take him to the address in question, but he had to wear a hood. The production house was the heart of Fadim's illegal business, and if the police found it, they could immediately take him to court, and for this reason, Fadim's men were very cautious. In short, upon arrival, Bobby was asked to remove his head covering, and it was here that he witnessed how all the drugs were packaged before finally being distributed.
What do you think?
In order to catch Fadim, the police had to get his confession, and for that, Bobby began to lure Fadim into telling everything related to his business, starting from how much drugs were produced to how they were smuggled. Initially, Fadim did not suspect a thing. He even invited Bobby to taste his goods, but as time went on, he began to feel that something was wrong.
You're breathing heavy.
When Bobby's belongings were searched, Fadim found 2 types of lighters, and once they were opened, Bobby could not say anything else except to say the secret code that Michael had previously told him.
Well, I'm feeling light as a feather from that shit.
Obisco.
Wait!
It turned out that the police had been following Bobby all along. They arrived just in time and began arresting all of Fadim's members. On the other hand, Bobby tried to survive with a sharp weapon, and if he hadn't hidden it under his jacket, he might have lost his life. But unfortunately, the problem now is that some police officers mistook him for a cartel member, and they didn't stop firing until he panicked and decided to jump out of the window. Bobby was immediately rushed to the hospital because his condition was really bad. while Fadim, even though he tried to run away, was eventually caught by the police. Shortly after, Inspector Bert arrived at the scene and kept asking why his son was made an informant, and that's when Fadim finally realized who Bobby really was. On the way to the hospital, Bobby couldn't stop worrying about his girlfriend's fate because after his cover was blown, Fadim's men would surely seek revenge. However, his father said that from then on, the police would escort him, and besides, Bobby was a key witness in this case. In short, after being treated for 5 months, Joe was finally able to return home, and it was seen that people were impatiently waiting for his return, including Bobby. Inside the house, the event looked normal, but outside there were already dozens of police and snipers on guard to ensure that no cartel members tried to approach them.
Saw your guards out there.
Daddy!
I didn't think they'd let you come.
We'll talk later, all right?
In the middle of the party, Joe and several high-ranking police officers had an intense conversation about Fadim's case, because until now they still didn't know where all the drugs were smuggled. The police were desperate and hoped that when interrogated, Fadim would tell everything. But Bobby suddenly interrupted the conversation and said that it was impossible, and the argument between Joe and Bobby broke out again.
Official police business, Pop. I mean, what are you going to do, make him an honorary man?
You hear what I said? Your brother's got a price on his head and you talk to him like that?
Inspector Bert felt sorry for Bobby because Joe didn't know about his brother's sacrifice, but Bobby tried not to take it to heart. Besides, he had to leave immediately because he had received information that his girlfriend secretly wanted to stop by her parents' house. This was very risky considering that their heads were still being targeted by the cartels. Bobby also tried to warn Jumbo not to try to meet with the cartels unless invited, as there was a possibility that the cartels would target him. Fadim's trial would take place in 2 months, and as a key witness, Bobby was forced to live in a state of anxiety, even having to stay at a different hotel every night.
Nobody can even know what motel we're staying at. You got 2 months.
A few days later, Joe came to the prison with the intention of interrogating Fadim, but suddenly the guards there said that Fadim had just been rushed to the hospital. Stupidly, none of the guards suspected that it was all just a ploy from Fadim to escape, and sure enough, not long afterward, they received news that Fadim had managed to escape and was missing.
Outside. A guy's got ambushed. Somebody might know this location. Get you moved.
Bobby was really worried about his fate, and who wouldn't be depressed when having to live in a feeling of caution? Not only that, he also couldn't even leave the house and do activities like other people in general. Inspector Bert tried to comfort his son while promising that no matter what happened, he would always be there to protect him. To be safe that afternoon, Bobby and his girlfriend moved again, and all the way they were escorted by 3 police cars. But the heavy rain made them a little careless, and as soon as they looked to the side, suddenly the cartel was ready to launch an attack.
What the fuck? How they find us?
Bobby immediately took over the wheel when the cartel was busy facing 2 police officers in front of them, and because of the heavy rain, it made it a little difficult for Bobby to find a way out. While his father, who was in the front row, tried to protect his son until he was involved in a shootout with the cartel, but in the end, the enemy managed to injure him. In a dying state, Inspector Bert tried to pull over, but his car had an accident. After waking up, Bobby finds himself in a hotel. He hopes the incident was just a dream, but Joe suddenly approaches him and informs him that their father's life could not be saved. Amidst this sadness, we wonder who might have leaked their location earlier. The next day, the funeral ceremony was held, and Inspector Bert's passing left many people in deep mourning. Hundreds of police officers and relatives accompanied his body, including Mr. Murat, Bobby's boss at the nightclub. In the midst of the funeral procession, Bobby accidentally saw 2 cartel members laughing in the distance, as if to say that this was what happened to those who messed with the cartel. The scene made Bobby even more disgusted, and he knew his father's death had to be avenged, but he couldn't do that as a civilian. In the end, he decided to join the police force, but his girlfriend strongly opposed his decision because just being a key witness had already put them in danger, let alone becoming a law enforcement officer.
He died for nothing.
No! No!
You can't do this! I won't let you!
The next day, Bobby was accepted into the police force through a special route, and the reason was simple. He had been an informant, and several of his family members were also high-ranking police officers. His training was even officially postponed until Fadim's case was resolved, as their primary focus was now solely on recapturing the escaped Fadim. Joe soon stopped by Bobby's office to congratulate him, and he was amazed that his brother would go this far. On the other hand, Joe still felt guilty because Fadim's escape was his responsibility. which meant their father's death could be considered his negligence.
When we finish this, you're gonna be okay?
Upon returning to the hotel, Amanda was gone, and he had left a letter, but Bobby refused to read it, and he had suspected this would happen. That night, Bobby stopped by the club newly established by Mr. Marat, and as promised, Jumbo was entrusted with managing the place. His arrival there was to find information about Fadim, but strangely, Jumbo instead diverted the conversation by asking about Amanda's whereabouts. At first, the conversation seemed normal, but Jumbo suddenly said that maybe Amanda left because she was tired of staying at the hotel all the time. At this point, Bobby immediately sensed something was wrong. How could his friend know where he was staying when that information was supposed to be strictly confidential?
You know where we were staying.
Come on. Give us a few minutes, okay?
To get more information, Bobby asked his friend to talk behind the building, and at first, Jumbo refused to say where he had gotten the information about his location. But after being pressured, he finally admitted that every time Bobby and Amanda moved locations, Amanda always informed him, and unfortunately, Jumbo passed that information on to Mr. Marat. It turned out that all this time, Fadim had only been his uncle's henchman, and who would have thought that the man Bobby considered his adoptive father was actually trying to kill him and his family.
He owns me. Don't say that!
Bobby immediately shared this information with his friends, and they were at a loss as to how to prove that Mr. Marat was a drug dealer. Fortunately, Bobby suddenly remembered that every Tuesday, Mr. Marat often took his nephew to practice horseback riding by the lake, and it was possible that the transaction took place during that time.
Yeah, I guess that's what we should go with.
Before parting ways, one of Bobby's father's old colleagues advised that rather than arresting the cartel members, it would be better for the police to kill them on the spot as revenge for killing Inspector Bert. Strangely, upon hearing this advice, Joe remained silent, while Bobby looked enthusiastic because he couldn't wait to meet Fadim again. Three days later, Mr. Marat took his niece to practice horse riding by the lake, and as Bobby suspected, it was all just a cover because the place was secretly filled with cartel members. It seemed they were about to conduct a major transaction, and remarkably, the police had been hiding behind the bushes since earlier, waiting for the right moment to make their move. They couldn't afford to be reckless considering the target of the arrest had brought a young child to the location. That afternoon, Mr. Marat had many buyers, and it turned out that he had been distributing drugs in a unique way, namely through fur coats. One coat could contain several kilograms of drugs, and the buyer only had to soak it in water and then boil the rinse water so that all the powder would return to its original form. After the transaction was completed, the ambush began, and the police immediately secured and protected Mr. Marat's niece. Then there was a shootout, and strangely enough, Joe collapsed first, not because of his injuries, but because of the trauma he suffered from the previous incident. On the other hand, Bobby, who was still inexperienced, dared to charge to the front line. Unfortunately, before Fadim could be arrested, Fadim managed to burn all the evidence and escape through the back door. Bobby did not remain idle and began pursuing his targets while Marat and Fadim fled into the bushes. The height of the plants made it difficult for the police to find them, and the situation was truly tense because the enemy could come from an unexpected direction. Tracking dogs were deployed to search for the two, but to no avail, and in the end, the police decided to burn all the plants. Even though the enemy was trapped, the impatient Bobby decided to go back inside. His feelings of revenge overcame his common sense, even though one wrong move could have resulted in Bobby burning to death there. Luckily, in the middle of his search, he managed to find the person he was looking for.
Bobby.
Following the advice of his late father's colleague, Bobby executed Fadim on the spot and left his body to burn along with the plants. When he left the scene, it turned out that his colleagues had also managed to capture Mr. Marat. Before being taken to the police station, Mr. Marat apologized to Bobby, saying that he had not known from the beginning that Inspector Bert was Bobby's biological father. Sometime later, the New York City Police Department held another award ceremony. However, before entering the ballroom, Bobby suddenly received news that Joe had decided to leave the narcotics division and move to the administration department. After the birth of his third child, it seemed that Joe no longer dared to risk his life as he had in the past. At the end of the film, we see Bobby sitting in deep thought. His revenge had been fulfilled, and he had successfully become a police officer. However, the world felt hollow because yesterday's incident had taken away his father, his lover, and his friend. And after that brutal act of revenge, the film came to an end.